So this morning, I'm going to be giving my perspective about rights of nature, and let me share my screen first. And let me maximize. Okay, so we have here rights of nature. Let me just give you a summary of the components of a rights of nature law. So it must have something about the right to exist, the right to continue to exist, and the right, if degraded, to be restored. So we talk about existence, perpetuation, and restoration. I am not going to discuss or to reprise the bill pending before the Senate and the House of Representatives. I think Yoli and Attorney Maki, they have given us so many inputs already regarding that bill. So I will just try to give you some inputs regarding the importance of a rights of nature law. So we have these three components. Now, the focus necessarily will be animals and creatures. From experience, we can already see that animals, the movement to free animals, to give them independent standing, have started long ago. And lately, we now have rivers, waters, and nature also. So these are the focus of a rights of nature law. Okay. Now, here in the Philippines, if you look at some of our laws, okay, I'd like to emphasize this one to everybody since we are unique in terms of educating law students in our country. The Philippines is the only country in the world, okay? The only country in the world which requires legal environmental law for students to take in law school. So there is no way that students will be able to study law without having to touch on environmental law. Why is this important? Because my experience when I go to law school, when I meet my students for the first time, they are so raw, they do not understand anything about environmental law or nature. First meeting, they will think that it is normal to be cutting down the trees. It is normal to mine the mountains. It is normal to reclaim Manila Bay in the name of economic development. Okay? So they do not have any inkling about the importance of nature or the components of nature. So now, after taking environmental law, you can be sure that our students are fully prepared to tackle environmental issues after they graduate. And how is this important? This is very important because when they get to become judges, when they get to become policymakers, they will be operating on an idea that nature is something that must be protected, that must be defended in court. So what happened last year was this. Legal Education Board came up with a new law curriculum. That law curriculum, I looked at it and it excluded environmental law. They already took out environmental law from the mandatory law curriculum. When I looked at it, I told myself it is wrong. So what did I do? I gathered the support of other lawyers, drafted a position paper with the Legal Education Board, and forwarded the position paper with the Legal Education Board. And gladly, last June, the Legal Education Board came up with a new curriculum, now with environmental law as a mandatory subject for all law students to study. So this one is a great achievement for us as a country, now that law students are required to study environmental law. So this is the focus, okay? Now, in addition to what Natalia has already narrated, okay, let me just reiterate some court decisions and laws that have been promulgated and enforced. So maybe for the information of many, habeas corpus has already been issued in several countries to protect the rights of animals. It started with Argentina. It's being fought in New York and in other countries. Ano po ba yung habeas corpus? It is a writ. It is a process issued by a court, okay, to determine the validity of the detention of a person. Now it can apply to animals. Now it can apply to components of nature, right? So the next development, legal personality to rivers. We see this in India, New Zealand, Colombia, and other countries. So in New Zealand, you already have the Wanganui people having the right to manage their own river, right? So Mother Nature rights, as Natalia has already told us, the Pachamama, it is already embodied in their constitution. And you see so many rights of nature ordinances already. United States, Ecuador, and Bolivia. We have some crude form of rights of nature here in the Philippines. Local ordinances, local resolutions being implemented at the local level. So we have court decisions and laws. Now, let me talk to you about the significance and implication of having a rights of nature law. Okay? What do you experience when you go to court and you are there? Let's say you have been terminated from work and you are there facing a moneyed employer. Okay? As they always say, you cannot fight a moneyed employer in court because that employer has all the resources. In much the same way, when you fight a big polluter, when you fight a big power company, when you fight a big mining company, what's your chance of even winning? Okay? So this is all about power. Powerless people do not have a voice in court. Powerless people do not have standing or do not have recognition in society. So let's equate this with nature. If we granted nature legal personality, it equalizes the equation in court. Okay? Because a powerless individual or entity has no personality to fight. And if you have no personality to fight, how can you espouse even your rights or even promote the protection of your rights? Now, granting some little power to nature so that nature can then engage big corporations and polluters, or at least give nature a fighting chance, so that your case will not be immediately thrown out, so that the Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources will at least listen to your complaints and pleas, right? So it is all about power. Next, legal standing in court is such an important idea, value by judges. If you do not give legal standing, legal personality to components of nature or to nature itself, how can it fight and how can it appear in court? Your case will be immediately thrown out. That's why we need legal standing for nature, because legal standing is what accords privileges and status. Nature can now be a party in interest in court cases. Okay? Nature can now assert a right of its own in court. So legal standing. Also, a rights of nature law, it instills the idea that nature is not simply for exploitation. Okay? Nature does not exist to satisfy us. Nature must be nurtured and cared for, inasmuch as individuals, Individuals, you can be hurt, you can feel pain, and you can articulate your pain. However, nature cannot do so. Nature cannot simply scream. When it screams, it's already the end of the line. You already have environmental disaster. So need a rights of nature law so that we can avoid exploitation of nature and we can preserve our natural resources. Okay, rights of nature. Also, rights of nature tells us that government must protect and preserve nature. In other jurisdictions, this is interchangeable or it can be both. Okay, so people have the legal obligation to preserve and protect nature. So both government and people, we have the legal obligation to preserve and protect nature. So what is happening now? Why are countries moving towards a rights of nature law? It's simply this. It is a simple matter of evolution. Ethical rights. We now know that certain individuals have more rights than others. Okay, that black people must be treated equally, and this is something that is still being discussed in the United States. As you can see, with the appointment of a new Supreme Court justice who is black. Okay, so ethical rights. We now are getting to recognize that animals, they have a right of their own. You go to Manila Zoo and you look at Mali, that poor elephant right there in the zoo, alone for the rest of her life, and who has never mingled with other elephants of her kind. Okay? Don't you think that that elephant deserves some happiness too in mingling with fellow elephants? So ethical rights are being concretized into law. More and more people are given rights by governments. The LGBTQ community, they are already being recognized by our government and even by our Supreme Court. Okay? So nature must also be accorded the same privilege because simply nature nurtures us. It gives us food. It gives us air. It gives us everything that is needed so that we may simply survive. So ethical rights are being concretized into law. Now, significance and implication. Many people say nature cannot speak, nature cannot act. But then again, this is where lawyers come to the picture. Lawyers can speak and represent nature. If the corporations have rights, if an estate of a dead person can speak through lawyers, what more with nature? So this is the importance now of lawyers. Lawyers coming to the fore and taking the cudgels for nature. Lawyers can speak and represent nature. Okay? Now, another thing that a rights of nature law will bring us, a recognition of nature will definitely change our values and mindsets. Because the prevailing value of most people now is tilted towards economic development. It is okay to reclaim the bay. It is okay to cut the trees. We must change those values. And the way to change that is through law. Because law changes the values of people. It molds them to act for the protection of nature. And if you have the rights of nature law, wherein certain people can come in and assert the rights of a body of water, the rights of trees, this will definitely prevent environmental damage for everybody. Okay? So significance and implication. Now, let me give you some tips regarding this election because I think one of the objectives of this webinar is to determine the leaders that we should be choosing during this election. I will give you 2 tips, and it's not that hard to follow. First, okay, if you see the poster of a candidate espousing, okay, environmental protection, using climate change as a platform for his program of government. And you see this poster pasted on top of trees, nailed on top of trees, okay? Pasted and attached permanently to concrete walls. Please do not vote for this candidate. Okay? Because it is a simple lifestyle check. Because if you are a candidate and you are supposed to represent and protect nature, what should you be doing? Avoid those that will hurt the environment. And if you're going to post your posters right there on walls, on trees, and you're going to litter every place in the Philippines, you are not for the environment. Definitely, you are just using the environment for your own selfish purposes. Secondly, this is, again, a simple guideline to follow. Look at the lifestyle of the candidate who is speaking on behalf of nature. Is that candidate driving many SUVs? Is the family of that candidate driving several cars and being followed by several bodyguards? Are they segregating in front of their house? And how have they been with respect to their carbon emissions? You visit their homes, look at their cars, look at their clothes, look at their cell phones. And if you think that after doing so, that candidate still represents nature, then by all means, vote for that candidate. If not, don't vote for that candidate. So it's a simple lifestyle check. It's a simple matter of checking where they are putting their campaign materials. And I think from there, we can proceed whether this person is truly an authentic nature defender. Okay, so thank you. I'm ready for the question.